This is TWiT.
Jason Snell has breaking news.
Leo, this just in. This just in.
Yes.
I hope you were not planning your financial future around buying an Apple car.
What?
Because Mark Bloomberg, as we like to call him, Mark Gurman at Bloomberg, shortened to Mark Bloomberg. Maybe he's been put in the will. I don't know. Has reported that Apple today canceled their car project after spending, more than $1 billion, several billion dollars on it. And for more than a decade, they have finally thrown in the towel and said, you know what? We could probably use these resources better on places that are relevant to our core products and where we're behind, maybe like generative AI. But and they do have a bunch of people working on machine learning stuff because they were trying to build, automated self-driving cars that they then started backing off of. And as Gurman reported, I think a month ago, they really were at a point where they were trying to basically make or break. Is this going to be a product? And let's run the numbers. And when can we release a product? And what can we make? And it sounds like their analysis was, I got to be honest here, what all of our analysis has been for the last 5 years, which is that it doesn't really make sense and they shouldn't do it. So they have killed that project.
Mark says Apple made the disclosure internally today. Didn't take long for him to get the memo. Just surprising, the nearly 2,000 employees working on the project said the people who asked not to be identified because the announcement wasn't public at the time. The decision was shared by Chief Operating Officer Jeff Williams, Kevin Lynch, Vice President in charge of the effort. They're going to wind it down. As you said, employees may move to the AI division. There are 2,000 people, several hundred hardware engineers and car designers. I don't know if they'll... Elon is probably hiring across town. Maybe that's where they'll end up. They often seem to end up over there at Tesla. I'm disappointed.
A lot of them end up at the core car, the traditional automakers too, because they want that talent.
Yeah.
Well, not only that, but
at Apple for a while.
Not only that, but they might be sending that talent back where they started. One of the few things that got me thinking that maybe they've got something they're committed to was that from the beginning all the way to just a few years ago, they were hiring people like top executives with amazing careers away from BMW, away from Mercedes, away from like major car makers, not Apple people who were gone into cars, but hey, why don't you leave the stable job at one of the best motorworks known to mankind and come to work for a company that has not even officially committed to making a car? And it always made me thought that whatever that pitch deck was, it must have been something incredible. So I wonder what those executives are thinking about right now. Again, if anything, their foray into Apple probably made them more valuable because they can now, I'm sure they signed lots of stuff, but you can't make them forget discussions that they were having with Apple about like what a platform needs to be. So now they can bring all that expertise from the consumer electronics and back into BMW, back into GM, back into, God forbid, Tesla. Oh, actually, they could use it maybe.
So when you do the math on that 2,000, by the way, that's like conservatively $300 to $500 million a year. Think about how much they've been spending on this.
Just the staff,
and that's
alone.
Just the staff, and that's not everything else. So you're probably talking about at least $1 billion a year that they were spending on trying to figure this out, and they decided.
Gurman at the end of this piece mentions that the board was also concerned about continuing to spend hundreds of millions of dollars a year on a project that may never see light of day.
So yeah, we said I think here we've talked about this quite a bit, and I think what's happened is as time has gone on, I've gotten less and less enthusiastic about this idea because it feels like they had a moment, right? There was a moment where the major automakers were not really getting it, and Tesla was on the move, and it felt like Tesla was doing it right and nobody else got it. And there was a place for another technology company like Apple to come in and insert itself. But boy, it feels like that time passed like 5 years ago, and everybody else has sort of gotten on board with more electronics and with moving toward electric, and other companies like Rivian have kind of come up in the meantime too. And like now you think, what could Apple contribute to the auto industry in 2030? And it would just be another car. And like, that's the last thing Apple should waste its money on.
Yeah. And also remember that even when this story first broke, I think it was the Wall Street Journal that broke it in 2014, something like that. At least that's when we first started talking about it. I think Johnny Ive was in his ultimate ascendancy. He was maybe, I imagine that his voice was also saying, here is something, we are a design company that works in electronics and consumer goods. The car is the ultimate design statement, the ultimate consumer good. Here is a place where we can make an amazing statement. I mean, again, this is the same shop that came out with the 2018 MacBook Pro. So maybe that was another force that was at least causing this to get a good launch to orbit initially.
A lot of alarm bells went off when there were those reports about how they were only going to launch it without a steering wheel and with complete autonomous driving. And it was one of those moments of like, what are they, what are they smoking inside there? Because it is not, it was never going to be like, that's like a worse delusion than Elon Musk. Elon Musk has these delusions of full self-driving that he keeps saying is just around the corner, and it has never come. But at least he builds cars with steering wheels, right? Like he's got at least a little bit of realism that this needs to be a real product. And Apple, I think that Apple in the early days of the car project was a victim of some people on the inside thinking big dreams like they could magic it into existence and not being real about what needed to be done to make the product happen. And I think that that's why they missed their moment.
And I think that when you take away the steering wheel, it forces you to solve the last mile. And that is just the most brutal last mile. I think that most of us would be really happy if you just solved the highway. Like if you just said, this is always going to work on a highway, I would be all in. But there's so many vagaries once you get off the highway of all these weird intersections and things and people's driveways and all these other things that it becomes very difficult. And so taking away all ability to make that adjustment makes a really, really high cliff to go over. I think that's the challenge there.
Don't go over a cliff. Don't do it. It's a bad car experience.
I think Tesla has a patent on that technology. They're pretty litigious about that.
When I was in Rwanda, this is the problem: is the maps think that there's things there. I was in Rwanda just blindly following Google Maps and came up to a cliff. And the water had washed away the road in between. But it was at night, and I almost went over it. And that's a human following that, not a machine doing it in kind of an unparalleled experience. And so,
I do think that we're in like chatbot AI and generative AI where we might have been like in 2013, 2014 with self-driving cars, where it was early enough in the game that nobody, I think, was 100% sure how easy or difficult this was. Kind of like how in the 60s, like we had, as it turned out, NASA had a very linear path to landing people on the moon. But they had, when they committed in 1959, 1960, they weren't sure, could we make these engines work? In theory, it could work. We don't know. Can people live and work in space? Can they spend 2 weeks in microgravity? And as they went on, oh, great. No, it turns out this is easy. Turns out this is solvable. Turns out it was very linear. I think that in 2013, because so much investment and so much talk and research went into this, they were at that stage where we don't know if this is a linear set of problems that we can simply throw enough money and experience at and solve them, or whether we are going to at some point hit a brick wall that is insurmountable. And I think that there was a time when everyone realized that no, level two is a perfection zone. We might make it to level 3, but self-driving is a fantasy that requires a breakthrough that is unpredictable and unforeseeable. And I think that AI is in the same level right here, as we're seeing with, Gemini is getting all the punchlines right now, but it's true of every single like large scale project to create a very functional, useful AI. They're still struggling to figure out how do we make this thing so it's stable and doesn't wind up spitting out 2,000 words about how it is a god and you must bow down before it and honor no god before ChatGPT.
Well, I think that also there's pre-COVID and post-COVID in the sense that when a big argument for self-driving is the commute. And when cities are 30%, with a 30% vacancy in downtown, it's not clear that commute is going to return at the same level again, or if it will remain. Like over time, more and more people, you saw this it jumped obviously during COVID, and then it backed up. People are coming back to the office. But I talk to people who are, if they're being forced to go into the office, their LinkedIn is fresh and moving. Like they're looking for remote. They're not quitting, but they're looking for the next place that they go. And these are people that love their job. They love the people they work with, and they love the company they work for. and they're still looking at moving, like because they don't want to drive. And so I think that the other thing is that the next generation. I mean, my kids are in no rush to get a license. It's hard to get, like the next generation just isn't interested in cars, And so I think that that's the other thing is if you're not going to get this done in 10 years, they're not the market for the cars may be a lot smaller than it was, when you started doing the development.
Hey, it's Leo Laporte. If you enjoyed this little snippet of our programming, make sure you check out the full MacBreak Weekly. The link is right down there.